Welcome to the Effortless English Show with the world's #1 English teacher, AJ Hoge, where AJ's more than 40 million students worldwide finally learn English once and for all, without the boring textbooks, classrooms, and grammar drills. Here's AJ with a quick piece to help you learn to speak fluent English effortlessly.
The easiest way to learn vocabulary. The most enjoyable way to learn new vocabulary. Learn new vocabulary in English. Vocabulary is important. Maybe it's the most important. In fact, that's what Steve Kaufman, the quite famous linguist, polyglot, as they call them, a man who speaks, over 20 languages now. He speaks over 20. I can't keep track because he's always adding languages. But anyway, Steve has said many times that vocabulary is the most important part of learning a language, and perhaps the most difficult part of learning a language. And it's not grammar, which is what a lot of people will think or say. It's vocabulary that is most important. And it's also the biggest challenge of learning a language. Of course, some languages, grammar is a challenge also. For many of you, English grammar is a challenge. I know that. But vocabulary, why vocabulary? And I agree with Steve. And the reason I agree is that, there's just, as he says, there's so many words to learn. Thousands and thousands and thousands. Now, to speak, to communicate, maybe you don't need so many, right? You can kind of speak very simply and use simple, common vocab, so you maybe need a few thousand words for that. But to understand, that's the challenge, especially to understand at a fluent level, at an advanced level, at a high level. To understand movies, to understand TV, to understand native speakers, to understand newspapers, books in English. You need to know a lot of words. You don't need to use all of those words when you speak, but you do need to understand them, and that's a big challenge. It's a very big challenge, okay? Because now we're talking 10,000 plus words, okay? Tens of thousands of words, and that takes quite a long time. So, first of all, welcome everybody. As always, go to effortlessenglishclub.com. That's where you get my courses. effortlessenglishclub.com. Join my VIP program or get Power English, pronunciation course. I have many courses. Business English. effortlessenglishclub.com. That's the website. Go there. You can look at the menu and see all the courses. At the bottom of the page on my website, I have a list of all my courses. So it's Effortless English Club, C-L-U-B, Club, effortlessenglishclub.com. Okay, so first a story about my children. My children are 3 years old, almost 4, and they are learning vocabulary so quickly. It's a miracle. It's amazing to watch it. I'm a little jealous, honestly, because they pick up the words so fast. But what's interesting is that, of course, they learn words just from listening to my wife and I talk in English and speaking to them. So conversation. And if you can have conversations with native speakers, if you can, go in and meet people who speak English and talk with them a lot, that's fantastic. That's really great. And you can learn some new words from them, of course. But the other way they learn new words is through stories. Right? Stories. We were reading a book. We got this big book that has a lot of stories, kind of some fairly old children's stories. So, for example, there's one called Caps for Sale. Caps for Sale. And it's about a guy who has a bunch of hats on his head, a bunch of caps, a bunch of hats on his head. And he just walks around a town selling the caps. And he takes a walk. He goes outside into the country and he sits down under a tree and he falls asleep. And when he wakes up, his caps are gone. He only has one cap on his head. So he looks around. He's like, where are my caps? And then he looks up into the tree, and there are a bunch of monkeys in the tree. And each monkey has one of his hats, right? So then it's kind of a short little story, and my kids love this story. They love it. They love it. So I've told them this story so many times, right? Because it has pictures, and they love it. They think it's really funny with the monkeys stealing the guy's hats. And because we've read it a lot, and because they think it's so funny, they have learned a lot of the vocabulary. You know, they repeat phrases from the story now, right? So if there's a part where he walks around, he says, cups for sale, 50 cents a cup. And they say, this repeats in the story many times, okay? This little phrase, cups for sale, 50 cents a cup. The guy walks around the town saying that. So my kids, of course, they pick it up and they start copying it. Caps for sale. Now they say it all the time. Caps for sale, 50. I say, how much are the caps? And they say 50 cents. Right? And they learn the word peddler. They call him a peddler. And a peddler it's a word. It means like someone who sells things. Usually someone who sells things like on the street. So a peddler doesn't usually sell things inside of a store. They usually outside selling things. We call that a peddler. And my kids know this word peddler now. Why? I mean, it's not a word they would hear from conversation with me. Because it's not a word we use a lot, but they've learned it. Why? Because of the story, right? And of course, this is not the only story. This book we have so many books with all these children's stories, and we read them again and again and again. They have lots and lots and lots of these favorite stories, and they're picking up the words, and not only words, but whole phrases, whole sentences, just by listening to these stories. You know, and their vocabulary growing so fast, and with a lot of, quote, advanced words, right? Words that most 4-year-olds would not know. Not typically. But because we read so much with so many stories, we do it all the time. We have all these favorites. And we go ahead and we read things that are fairly advanced, These stories, of course, they can't read them yet. They're way too difficult for them to read. They can't read anything yet. They're just learning the letters now, and they actually can they can read a few words, a couple words, very short words like cat, dog. But they can't. These stories are using vocabulary much more advanced than that. So of course, I read the stories to them. And they are getting a lot advanced phrases and grammar vocab from these stories. So here's the key point. I make no attempt, zero. I do not try to teach them vocabulary. I do not pick out words in the story and say, what's that? Now, sometimes they ask me, and then I'll try to explain. But I don't do it. I never test them on it. I never say, what does peddler mean, kids? Right? What does 50 cents a cap mean? Right? It means 50 cents each, right? But I don't test them on this. There's no testing, there's no quizzes, nothing like school. Right? Nothing at all. We just enjoy the story. And they sometimes ask me questions so they can understand the stories. And of course, these stories have pictures, which is great. And I think this is even useful for you adults. We'll talk about it in a minute, how this can help you. But the point is, these guys are super language learners. Not just my kids, young kids in general, right? If you have young kids, you've seen this happen where they hit a point and where their vocabulary grows so fast, I can't even remember where they hear the words, because now they hear a word one time and they remember it and use it. It's amazing. Now, we adults need more repetition. But they also get a lot of repetition, right? So what can we learn from my kids' example here? Well, number one, stories are the best way, okay? My title today is Easiest Way to Learn Vocabulary. What is it? Learning with stories. Learning words with stories is the easiest way to learn vocabulary. What do I mean by easiest? Number one, it's the fastest way. Number two, it's easiest to remember. You don't need a lot of effort. You can learn a lot of words effortlessly, meaning you're not really trying to learn a lot of words, but you're getting them. Yeah, you can review them, especially as an adult. You can review them. You can use a little online dictionary quickly to find the meaning of words, but you don't need to make huge lists and study and do all this like school stuff of quizzing yourself constantly. You can do it. You can make flashcards. Some people like to do that. Some people will, have review flashcards. They use some kind of app like Anki or something, but you don't have to. It's not necessary. Especially if you read and listen to the same stories more than one time. The repetition, you'll start to remember a lot of those new words just from repeating the stories. No need to do a bunch of pretty boring vocabulary review. For most people, flashcards, Anki, that kind of thing, for most people, that's boring. For me, I find it super boring. I've tried it several times at different points with different languages, and I just hate it. I never can continue doing it. I find it so boring. I'd much rather just listen to a story again and get that repetition through the story. So, stories, repetition. This is another key point. My kids, they don't just listen to the story one time, right? They love the story. It's funny to them. They like the story with the monkeys, and they want to hear it, and they want to hear it again and again. Like every day we read that story or we read from that book. There's Harold and the Purple Crayon. Some of you might know these stories. They're somewhat famous. There's they got so many it's hard to remember. Green Eggs and Ham, if you guys know that. That's a Dr. Seuss book. I do not like Green Eggs and Ham. I do not like them, Sam. I almost have the book memorized because I've read that story to them so many times that I can almost memorize the whole thing. And of course, they learn vocabulary from that because they also kind of memorize it. And sometimes they just memorize the words. They don't even really know what it means, but they like the sound of the word. And they'll just start repeating it and saying it. And from repetition, and sometimes they ask me, but a lot of times they'll just guess and they figure out the meaning just from the repetition. They'll eventually figure it out, and then it becomes part of their language that they use when they speak. So this is very, 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 very powerful. Okay, so this is why in Effortless English I use stories so much. And of course, I'm not the only person. Blaine Ray, we're going to read from Blaine Ray's book, TPR storytelling, right? TPRS is one of the techniques I use to teach you English in all my courses. Actually, not the most advanced courses. We use stories, but not the TPRS method. But I use stories in all of them. They all have stories or articles or topics, right? I don't test you on vocabulary. I don't give you grammar tests. We talk about things. We talk about stories. We talk about ideas, right? The focus is not on the language. It's not the first focus. So that's what's interesting, right? I do not try to teach my kids English. I don't do English lessons with them. I don't have grammar lessons with them. I don't have vocabulary lessons with them. I don't test them on vocabulary or grammar or pronunciation. None of that. We use the language, reading stories, and of course talking to each other, conversation. And then as things come up, they learn stuff just by using and doing the language. So they're learning while doing. This is a general idea or concept for learning skills that works best, not study, but do it and learn as you do it, even when you're really bad as a beginner, right? This is how I learned jiu-jitsu. Right? I'm not studying books of jiu-jitsu. I'm not just doing techniques only in jiu-jitsu. I'm doing jiu-jitsu. I'm fighting, and then I have a problem. I have some things I'm having a problem in some kind of position when I'm fighting, and now I'm like, what do I do, right? And then I have to learn something new because I need it for this situation. Or I watch a video, or I watch another guy doing something, or I get something from the class and then I try it, right? But I'm doing it. Same with business. You don't need to go to business school and get a master's in business. Just start a business and learn as you do it. You will learn through experience. And of course, yes, read books and take courses, but start the business. Okay? Take courses and learn while you are doing it. Right? So it's the same kind of idea with English. Go ahead and start using English, doing English, reading, listening to stories, talking to people, and then you'll learn as you do it, right? There's this idea in school. First you must learn, then you do, right? Like they're separate. First you spend 5 years studying English, taking tests, memorizing, and then finally you can talk to somebody and you can use it. This is the idea. Of course, it doesn't work. We all know that doesn't work. That's why you all joined Effortless English. What does work is just jump in and start doing it. And then as you're doing it, you learn as you're doing it. So this is exactly what my kids do. And they're learning so fast. It's impressive. It's very, very, very impressive. So things you can learn. Number one, learn from stories. You can by reading and listening both. You can learn with my mini stories in my courses. I use a technique called TPRs. TPR, storytelling. The S part means storytelling. So it's using stories. Why stories? Why are stories so good? Why do my kids like stories? Why does that work better than a vocabulary list or tests? Right? Because it's funny, it's interesting, it's emotional. They are not focused on English. They don't think about English. They never think about English. They don't think about it. They're focused on the story. They're focused on a conversation with me. We make little stories too with their little animals. They've got these little animals, these toys, and we make stories. Oh, the penguin's sick. Like my daughter today, she had a little penguin. She said, oh, the penguin's sick. He's going to the hospital. Oh, we'll put a scarf around his neck so he's warm. He's cold. And she's making this whole story about this little penguin, and then I can join in and ask her questions about it. Oh, why is he sick? What are you going to do? Are you going to help him? And then her brother also, they start talking about it, right? So they're creating stories too. They're using language. They're learning language, teaching each other language. They're learning it from me, but it's all from stories and conversations. And even our conversations are often storytelling, right? And it's the same thing. They listen. Right now, they can't read. They listen to me read. So they're listening again, listening focused. This is another key point that as a beginner and in the intermediate levels, that listening is very important. Of course, you can read if you're an adult, so you can go ahead and learn to read too, and read a lot. Reading is also fantastic. But don't forget to do a lot of listening too. And the key point is focus on the story and the meaning. Don't focus on the language so much. Again, as an adult, you might focus on the language a bit more because you can. But I would say don't. My advice is don't spend a lot of time on flashcards and lists. You can do a very quick review. I think something like Gold List might be good for that. Whatever you like. But the truth is, it's not even necessary. You don't even have to do that at all. If you just can enjoy the stories, then you can just spend your time listening to stories. Now, of course, as an adult, you may also want to do nonfiction. So fiction stories are great, like the Caps for Sale story with my kids about the monkeys taking the hats. It's a funny story. It's something like I would tell. It's the kind of story I tell in my courses, right? Kind of funny, and it's so you remember it. And it's not too serious, it's not too heavy. But you can also even do nonfiction, like stories, like more like, news stories or information, stories about business, stories about a topic. That's why I talk a lot about motivational topics. I talk a lot about business. I talk about money. I talk about philosophy. Right? Why? Because I don't want to just talk about vocab and grammar, because you actually will forget that because it's boring. You actually will remember more vocabulary and even grammar and just English in general by not focusing on the parts of the language. Instead, focus on topics and information, and especially stories. And the other thing we learn from my children's example is repetition. Don't listen to a story just once, if you like it. If you don't like something, then one time's enough, right? But your favorite stories, you should listen to or read again and again and again and again, right? Do it 10 times, do it 50 times, do it 100 times. If it's kind of funny, if it's kind of interesting, if you like it, it's totally fine. Just like some of us, we maybe have a favorite movie, especially when we're young, and you might watch that same movie, 10, 20, 30 times, right? When I was a kid, it was Star Wars, the first Star Wars movie that came out. I think I saw it 13 times. I went to a movie theater and saw it when it came out. I was, I don't know, like 12 years old, I think. And then I've seen it on video many, many times too, right? It's just a favorite movie. So we do this, and it's very good. That repetition's great. Even books, I've read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings many, many times. I can't remember how many times I've read it, but a lot. Starting way back in 4th grade when I was, again, around that same age, about 13 years old. And then, I think I read that book recently again. It was like a couple years ago. So read your favorite books again and again in English. Read your favorite stories again and again. Listen to your favorite stories again and again. And I tell you in my courses with my mini stories and with the main stories as well, the main topics, the main articles, I tell you, listen again and again. You must repeat these, right? Especially the ones you like. That's why I do motivational topics, because motivational topics are really good for repetition. It's good to hear it again. Even though you know it, if you hear it again, and it gets you excited again, it gets you feeling strong again, gets you feeling good again. It's good to hear these topics many, many, many times. We have to be reminded again and again. It's also good for language learning because you're getting a repetition of the pronunciation, the vocabulary, the grammar, the listening, all of that. Repetition is also very important, but repetition that you enjoy. You must find a way to make repetition enjoyable. For most people, repeating a story is more enjoyable than repeating flashcards or a list. For most people. There are a few people who like that kind of thing, but for most people, if you ask, well, would you rather listen to this story again, or do you want to study this list of words again? Most people would enjoy listening to the story again. So there you go. Finally, I'll get to the comments and the live comments and questions in a minute. I'm just going to read this brief little, this is from a Blaine Ray's book. He's a language teacher. He was a Spanish teacher. Now he trains other teachers how to teach languages. He had big influence on my teaching. And this is a little 7 points from his book. It says the keys to fluency. What are the keys to fluency? He's saying, how do we help students become fluent, to speak fluently? Not perfectly. You'll never be perfect, okay, but fluently. Communicate well. Number 1, a language class must be comprehensible, or lessons, or a course. Must be comprehensible means understandable. If you don't understand it, you're not going to learn much. So this is why stories help. Because of the story, you understand the situation of the story. And if it has pictures, you guys can do picture books too. You can do graphic novels, comic books. Those are great, even as adults learning English or another language. Because the visuals, the pictures help you guess the meaning of words and guess what's happening. And this can help you learn faster. That's why movies can be helpful. So it has to be understandable. If you don't understand anything, it doesn't help, right? You can't learn. Okay. Number 2, students must have sufficient oral comprehensible input of basic vocab and structures. So oral, this is A-U-R-A-L. It means through your ears, listening. So in other words, enough listening input. So that basic fluency of being able to talk well, speak well, quickly, and feeling it's effortlessly, feeling it you can speak effortlessly, that it's effortless. This comes from listening. Reading can help you a lot with vocab, but you gotta get a lot of listening, is what he's saying, and that's true. Okay, number 3, this is important. The input, the oral input, the listening input, must maintain the interest of students. So they have to be interested in it. This is why just repeating a list of words, there's this old Berlitz course I had one time, long time ago. I used it. It was in Danish, I think. I was at his job. I was bored. I could listen to audios, while I was doing my job. So I got this Berlitz course. It was terrible. It just repeated vocabulary words. That's all it did. Although I remember one sentence, Vilken vei skal vi gå? And that's all I remember. But anyway, so it needs to be interesting. This is, again, why stories are more interesting than grammar rules. Stories are more interesting than lists of vocabulary. Stories are more interesting than most English classes. Okay, point number 4. There must be at least one way for students to develop oral expression. In other words, to speak. So they need a chance to do some speaking. You need some speaking practice eventually, right? So it's fine to focus a lot on listening if you want to for a while, and input, but you got to start speaking at some point, obviously. You got to start doing it. And I've changed my mind on this. I think that Benny Lewis is right. Just jump in and start speaking on day 1. Why not? Just use what you have. Try to talk to people. Make tons of mistakes. Okay, point number 5. The language class, must be almost completely in the target language. So for you, that means English. So the course, my Effortless English course, for example, is in English 100%. So maybe you've had this experience. I did in school where I was in Spanish class, but this teacher spoke English like more than half the time, which is kind of crazy. Like, it was Spanish class, but I'm listening mostly to English. He's explaining Spanish using English. So I didn't get much Spanish listening from that class. Point number 6, this is very important. The process of language learning must be relatively stress-free. So no stress, no anxiety. It should be easy and enjoyable and or interesting. So 3 important words, that the English courses should feel fairly easy. So we need a little challenge because that makes it interesting. If it's too easy, it's boring. But too difficult, we become stressed out. All right. It should be enjoyable. Again, this is why stories are fun. My kids enjoy listening to the stories about monkeys stealing the hats. It's funny. It's a funny story to them. So it doesn't feel like English class to them. It's just a funny story that they like. And of course, I jump around and pretend I'm a monkey, and it's really fun, and they do too. And then finally, number 7, teacher expectations must be high. This simply means that if you're in a class with a teacher, the teacher should expect you, should believe in you, believe that you can succeed, right? Like, really believe that you can become fluent. And I definitely believe you can become fluent. I know you can. Because so many have used these methods to do it. If you're motivated, if you really want to. That's the key thing. Good points. That's from Blaine Ray. All right, so effortlessenglishclub.com. That's my website. All my courses use these exact methods. We follow all of those ideas that Blaine Ray talked about. And, lots of stories, interesting, motivational topics. That's why I do it that way. Okay, let's get into our live comments and questions now. Okay, I'm just going to go back up here. There are lots of them on my screen. There are lots of people just saying hello, and hello to all of you. Thank you. Anna says, good hairstyle, you look handsome. My wife cut my hair. I agree. She did a good job. Yeah, like Anna says, you already told us the most effective way for learning vocabulary is reading those topics you're interested in. Exactly. And I think specifically, but to be more specific, stories. And listening too. We shouldn't neglect listening. Yeah, like Anna points out, for instance, I'm really into the beauty industry now. I try to watch lots of videos connected to this stuff. It really works. Yes, and so see, this is where as an adult, not only, with kids, they like funny stories and things like this. And funny stories are good for adults and children. But as an adult, you can also do stories or information, articles, videos about any topic that you really, really like. So if you really, really like cooking, you can watch cooking videos and read recipes, and you could read books or listen to videos about cooking techniques. You could do all of this in English, and it'll be interesting to you because it's a topic that's very interesting to you. And that's generally good advice. Okay, Monam Alhani says it's 3 a.m. in Morocco. Wow, you're up late. I'm a teacher. My students get bored in school. How can I make it better? Give me some tricks. Use TPRS. I don't know what you teach, so it's a little hard for me to say. But if you teach English, you should use the TPRS technique, TPR storytelling technique. Get Blaine Ray's book and start practicing with it. It'll take time to learn it, in the beginning. You'll feel like you'll have some bad classes. I did. But you'll get it. And it's fun. It's way, way, way more interesting and more effective than the normal way of teaching in a classroom, right? Because I used to teach the normal way too. I would use, you just follow the textbooks. The school gives you these textbooks and you just follow them and do the lessons in the book. And it's boring. Incredibly boring. Those textbooks are boring. They're boring. So when you switch to something like TPRS storytelling, and then every day, what is your class? Just another story. It's a new story. Or you can even make big long stories. So, today's part 1 and tomorrow's part 2 and next day's part 3, and you get the students to help you create the story. And a lot of teachers, TPRS teachers, have done some really very creative, cool things with their storytelling. But you can just start simply, and I think your students will find it far more interesting than the normal way of teaching language. Great. Jefferson Diego says, hi, I'm from Brazil, still studying this every single day. It's been 1,036 days. Wow, that's fantastic. I'm very happy with my progress. My focus now is speaking. Yeah, for sure. I think you should be ready now to start to focus on, make your focus speaking and talking to people. That's really great. That's why Aniso says that's why mini stories are great. Indeed, indeed, indeed. Ming Boyev says, I'm from Uzbekistan. I sometimes get bored with the English language. I can't do my homework because it will mean I will get bored. Yeah. Well, it is because it's boring. That's why. You're normal. It's okay. Luis Padilla says, my students, they like to learn English, but they have motivation, but they don't like to do activities or speak. Again, I recommend TPRS. And you're going to have to. And sometimes it's also, I'll just give you the truth is, this is just my experience as a public speaker. Sometimes it's like your force of will, like it's your energy as a teacher that like you have to be a motivator. You've got to become kind of a performer to, get them moving and overcome their shyness, right? I've had to do this, a lot as a public speaker, really hard as a public speaker sometimes, because I would do, seminars. So I'd come in like a 1-day seminar with people I'd never seen before and adults, and, kids are challenging to teach because the young ones are challenging to teach, but adults are also challenging to teach because they often are also very shy and serious, and my style is to get them up and shouting and moving and jumping and all these things, kind of crazy things for adults. So how do I get them to do that? How did I get them to do that? Well, I would have to have a huge amount of energy. I'd have to come in there and, the basic idea is I would not accept no. I would keep bugging them and I would get close to them and I'd be using energy and like, stand up, come on. And then they would say, maybe I would say, I want you to shout your answer. I'll ask you a question. Was there a dog? And you say, yes. And then I'll say that to them, right? I'll say, I want you to shout with energy and use your body. What did they do the first time? They go, yes. Yes, kind of shy. They didn't shout. They don't use their body. They don't use a loud voice. So this is the challenge now as a teacher. If you accept that, if you accept their unacceptable answer, if you ask them to be energetic and loud and they're not, you have to demand it. You have to be kind of demanding to be a good teacher sometimes. Not in a mean way. You're not hitting them. You're not yelling at them. You're not insulting them. But on the other hand, you don't accept no, and you don't accept, this is what Blaine is saying, that you have high expectations. That was point number 7. You will keep doing it until you get the response you want. So if you want a high energy class, you ask them to do something and you say, shout your answer with a strong voice and a smile. And they go, yeah. What do? You can do it in a funny way. I always do it in a funny way. I'll say, what was that? That was terrible. That was no energy at all. Let's try it again. Not this. Yay. Let's try it a little more energy. That was a 1. I want a 10. 10 is maximum energy. That was a 1. Let's try 3. Give me a 3. And they'll go, yay. A little more. And then you'll say, okay, that was a 3. That was okay. Let's try it again. And you just keep doing this. I'll do the whole class. I'll do 30 minutes until I get them yelling and doing what I want. I will not keep going to the next point. See, we have these lesson plans as teachers sometimes, and we think we have to do everything in the lesson. But this is the most important thing. If you can't get them, you have to win the audience, okay? And your class is the audience. Until you get them, showing you the proper energy and giving you the right responses and having that, that focus, that energy, then nothing else matters. A group that does this so well is Passel down in Vietnam, that I've been working with them for so many years now. They are fantastic, and that's what they do. They understand this, and their teachers are absolutely incredible. This is what you have to do as a teacher, and the good news is once you get them doing it, it becomes easier and easier and easier. But those, in the beginning, it can be hard. And many times after a first class or a seminar, I'll be exhausted. I'm sweating and I'm jumping and shouting and I'm pouring all my energy into them. Like I said, if with a class you see again every day, you don't need to be that high. You don't need to give that much effort always. But in the beginning, you do. Until you overcome and get the response you want, you must expect the best from them. If they don't give you the best, you demand it. you demand it in a nice way, in a smiling way, in a funny way. You joke, you tease. I like to tease them a lot. Teasing is a great way, right? You don't yell at them, that sucked, what's wrong with you kids? Don't do that. That's terrible. Okay, but you say, what? You kind of just exaggerate and be funny, like, what was that? Oh my God. Did you guys need some coffee? What's wrong with you? Are you asleep? Oh, that was terrible. No energy at all. I'm 55 years old. How old are you? 18. I've got more energy than you. What's wrong with you? Come on. And then, let's try it again. Come on, let's do it. All right, one more time. Was there a dog? Yes. Okay, that was so-so. That was a 5. I want 10. A 10, you can't sit in your chair. You got to stand up. A 10, you've got to jump. A 10, you've got to shout. Let's try it again. They do it again. A little more energy. It's still not a 10. Do you stop? Do you say, that's good enough? No, you expect the best. You say you want a 10 in energy, highest level. You keep going until they show you 10. Not 9, not 8, not 7. You keep going, you keep demanding, you keep teasing, you do anything and everything you need to do until they are shouting and jumping and going crazy. And then when they do it, you're just like, yes, that's a 10. That's what I want. Okay? Then you continue with your story, continue with your lesson. What will happen? They'll give you that 10 energy for probably 5 minutes, and then it'll start to drop again. This is just natural. It's going to drop, okay? Because, they get a little tired. They lose their focus. They're going to start dropping back down again. They're going to drop down to an 8, a 7. And when they start dropping down to like a 6 or a 5, you've got to do it again. You say, whoa, we're losing energy. What was that? We're back down to 5 again. All right, everybody stand up. Let's do it again. I want a 10. Let's go. And you got it. You're going to have to keep doing this again and again. Okay? Teaching can be hard work. Okay? It requires energy. Now, the good news is storytelling, TPR storytelling, this way of teaching, you don't need to plan so much. You don't need some teachers plan their classes. Like they spend hours every day planning their classes. It's not necessary to do. Once you get used to the technique, it's almost no planning. You write down a couple of vocab words or one grammar point that you want to focus on, and then go in and start telling stories. You get really good at it, and you can do it fast. That's the good news. That makes it easy. But the part that makes it challenging is you've got to give some energy. Okay? Now, I'm kind of, my style is more like Jim Carrey when I teach. Okay? I use my face. I jump around. I'm using my body a lot. I run. I jump. I roll around on the floor. I do it crazy stuff like that. That's my style. You don't need to do that exactly. Okay. Blaine Ray is a teacher. He's more. He's not so physical. He doesn't move around a lot, but he's got a smile and he's funny and he's joking and he's got that energy, right? It's a different kind of energy, but he's got that energy, he's got that humor, and you've got to develop, he's entertaining. You're an entertainer. You have to have a little bit of entertainment as a teacher to be good. At least as a language teacher. All right, let's keep going. Olga says, my 4-year-old daughter sometimes gives out compound phrases that not even an adult uses in his life. Sometimes I get so funny I can't stop. I know, right? It's absolutely amazing. My kids are starting to do this too. They'll just say this phrase and I'm like, where did you learn that? It's usually from a story we read. I'll eventually a word or a phrase, and it's like quite advanced. I know it's quite amazing. Really, it's kind of miraculous, I think. Yeah, Anna says, my child likes exactly one fairy tale. I've read it lots of times. Sometimes I close my eyes and start to retell it. My kid stops and tells me, why don't you read it? Yeah, exactly. If you've got kids, you'll know, like, some of these stories, you just memorize them, right? Because your kids like them so much. They want to hear them again and again and again. Like, there's some of them, I'm the same. I don't even look at the page anymore. I can say it. I don't need to read it. Yeah, see, Anise says, I've read the Harry Potter books many times. Maybe 100 times. I enjoy the show as well. Yeah, and see, this is great. You can read the book and read it many times. Books. And you can also then go watch the movies. And then you get the audio input. And you can get an audio book and listen to it. All right? And you can get all that repetition. And if it's something that you do this with your favorites. You don't have to do this with everything. But the ones you really, really like, absolutely repeat them a lot. Okay, well, the questions are coming fast, so let me just kind of... A lot of Harry Potter fans. Yong Yang says, there are about 80 words or phrases in one chapter that are new to me when I read Harry Potter. That's quite a lot, but if you're enjoying it, do it. If you're not enjoying it, if you're finding that very stressful, then you might go and do something a little easier and then come back again to Harry Potter. You can always come back. Yeah, Aline Silva says, I really think flashcards are boring. Reading the books are much better. Yeah, I agree. I'm the same, and I think a lot of people are the same, that it's tough to do those flashcards. Anna's asking me, what's your attitude towards Harry Potter, AJ? I'm 30 years old. I've never read it. Could you advise me to read it? I have never read it. I've heard so many times that some books must be read at a certain age. I've never read Harry Potter, so I can't say about the books. I've seen the movies. They were okay. I liked them. I like I'm more of a Lord of the Rings fan, Tolkien. So, but I don't know, but my guess is that Tolkien's harder, meaning a more difficult vocabulary and even sentence structure. So, but if you can handle Lord of the Rings, then give it a try. Or even The Hobbit. The Hobbit's easier than Lord of the Rings, probably. Yeah, and Olga says, when I was little, I myself liked to listen to the same story many times. I still remember the story. Yep, me too. I had my favorites. The Hobbit was one of my favorites. I had this record at that time, records, and I read The Hobbit, and then I had this record that was they made a little cartoon about The Hobbit, and then they had a record. It was just the soundtrack, the characters talking, and I would play that record again and again. Adi the Thai says, I'm an English tutor for little kids. I used your techniques with them, and oh my God, they can do for their tests, for their school. It was amazing. Made me so proud of them. Awesome. Yes, kids respond very well to this. They much prefer this way of learning. I think adults do too, but kids for sure. NJ says, do you have a suggestion for a 10-year-old boy? He's not a Harry Potter fan, but he's more of a ninja type. Maybe comic books, like anime. You have to find it in English, though, of course. But you could probably find some. I don't know specifically ninjas, but try to find some ninja anime, manga, comic books, in English about ninjas. Or even just other stories about ninjas in English. You have to do some research get online and see what you can find. Oh, Orzbek says, what do you know about Dubai for living and working? I've only been in the Dubai airport, so I don't know anything about Dubai. Living or working there, I don't know. Real Caribbean Spanish says, I'm fluent in English. I want to get rid of my Spanish accent. Do you sell a course? Yes, I have a pronunciation course on my website, effortlessenglishclub.com. It's called the pronunciation course. Simple. Hoge says, we had a scandal in Russia. A well-known psychologist traveled to cities. He was very cheerful and energetic, kept the audience under control. Other day, he had a conflict with one of the inadequate listeners. He hit her with a bag. It's unclear how to keep the audience properly. Well, if you're possibly going to have a hostile audience or just not a hostile people in it, then you need to have security. Because, the speaker shouldn't be the one doing this. He should have had security guards come and take the person out. That's how you do it. If someone who's disrupting your speech, causing problems, because they're crazy people all around or people who just like to do that to get attention, you just have to have them removed. But you don't want the speaker to have to interrupt what they're doing and go over and deal with that. You can deal with smaller things as a speaker, but when it gets to that level, ideally just say, security, get this person out of here, right? So he made a mistake. He should have had some security guards do it. Yeah, Amina says, AJ, I listened to your mini story lessons 30 times so I can memorize vocab in the mini story easily, and I'll never forget them. Right, exactly. And you will when you use my mini story lessons. That is exactly the point. Now, and you're also, by the way, you're also learning the grammar. You probably don't realize that you're learning the grammar. I don't talk about the grammar, but you are getting a lot of those grammar structures, memorizing them, absorbing them, getting them deeply, unconsciously from all that repetition. Because I use a lot of repetition when I tell the stories. It's part of the technique is to ask questions and create a lot of repetition in the story. And then you repeat the story again also. So it's a huge amount of repetition without flashcards. Nothing boring. This is a very specific question. Edo Shihomobing says, if I work as a legal consultant or a lawyer, what's the best way to improve my vocabulary? Read more about regulation, laws, and agreements, or read things related to law theory. I honestly don't know. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. That's very, very specific. Whichever one is most useful, like for your work, like which one has the kinds of words and phrases that you will need for your actual job. But I can't tell you specifically because I know nothing about law theory at all. So you have to figure that one out. Oh yeah, Adi is doing weightlifting while listening to this podcast. All right, I think we're almost done. Maybe a couple more and then we'll go. Is the level of your Power English course equal to middle school or high school? It would be high school for sure. But jump in and do it anyway if you're lower than that. AJ, it says, what kind of books have you been reading recently? I've been reading cookbooks. I'm learning to cook. 55 years old, and I'm finally learning to cook because of my children. So I've decided to start doing more of the cooking in our family. So my wife does a lot of other stuff, and also just because I used to go out to restaurants a lot, and now I don't. So I've decided I'm going to try to really learn to cook and like make decent food and stuff that tastes good. So I've been reading not just cookbooks, but watching videos and reading books about like cooking techniques. Really basic, like how to chop an onion, how to dice an onion. And also I found a few more things like just about cooking theory, like some chef training things, just about how to combine flavors, how to put flavors together, sweet and sour and salty and spicy, and put them together to make something that tastes good, how to make sauces. So it's been a lot of cooking stuff lately. Grammar Detective says, "Hi, I am an English teacher, coach from Canada, and a live streamer. I'm a big fan of what you do. Keep being great. Thank you." Hamidullah Moman says, "What is your instructions for me? I am in California now. What can I do? What is needed to start a business or something?" Oh, well, that's a very, very, very general, big question. I don't know. What are you good at? Yeah. So there's so many businesses. Generally, what are you good at? What will you enjoy doing? It doesn't have to be your number one passion in life, but to start a business, you probably should at least like doing it, or else you're gonna why be unhappy, right? Why start a business doing something you don't like? And then you'll be forced to do something you don't like all the time. I guess if your only motivation is money, like some people do that, but I don't like that at all. So find something that you enjoy, something you're good at, that you can do well, and something that doesn't require much money to start. I think if you're new to starting businesses, which sounds like you are, that doing something low risk, starting low risk, it means you don't need a lot of money to start it. So could you go open a giant restaurant? Yes, you could try that, but it's super high risk. If you can get the money from a bank or somebody, borrow the money, or even if you have the money yourself, you could do it, but it's a giant risk if you've never done that before, because it's a hard business, and can eat up a lot of money. I would recommend starting with something small, maybe even just a service business something you can do to help people. You don't need to spend much money to start it. You can learn as you do it. And then maybe as you get more experience and become better at business, then you can try something bigger. Oh, Roberto Hernandez says, "I bought your book. It's excellent." Thank you, Roberto. Do I have another podcast? Because I've listened to all your podcasts while running. I'm sorry, Adi. I don't have another podcast. I'll try to do more. English, your Indian friend. You're not replying on Gab. I've improved. Yeah, I haven't been active on Gab for a few weeks. I've been obviously I haven't done any podcasts either. So I've taken a little break the last, couple months since the new year. Haven't done much. Tried to get more active again. Anna asks, "What kind of books do you read to your children, modern or old?" Aesop's Tales. Yeah, stuff like Aesop. It's kind of a mix of, old, nothing really new. Probably a lot of stuff written back in like 1950s, maybe early 1960s, and then older. Not much from, the 2000s. In fact, maybe nothing, in fact, from that. It's all, that's not super old, but it's nothing like really current. Because now children's books are filled with all kinds of political and social programming and garbage and weird stuff. And I don't like any of the new children's book stuff. It's terrible. They're always pushing some, weird social thing. So I like old stuff in general. Old meaning about probably like 50, 60, 70 years old or more. Now we do homeschooling, and a lot of our stories come from a homeschooling curriculum. It's called Sunlight, S-O-N, Sunlight. And it's their preschool curriculum. And what I like about Sunlight is it's focused on literature, focused on reading a lot, very focused on reading. And it's just a bunch of books and stories. It's not textbooks. It's just storybooks. So, I bought it, and they just send us a huge box of stories, of just different storybooks for kids. And they're all really great. They're older. It's a Christian company, and that means that the stories are much more traditional and family friendly. There are not many that are specifically Christian. Maybe. I think they had like a kids' Bible stories in there. We're not Christians, so we don't really do those. I don't use that book. But most of them are just good family-friendly, traditional stories, fairly traditional, with decent values. So I think that anyone could use it. It doesn't matter your religion. Sunlight. Oh, Adi, thank you for the donation. Tybot, 29 Tybot. Thank you very much. When will you come to Brazil? Asked Mila. I don't know. One of my jiu-jitsu teachers, my jiu-jitsu instructors, is moving to Brazil this summer. He's going to train jiu-jitsu full-time in Sao Paulo. So, very cool for him. Excited for him. It's great. But for me, I don't know. I'll hope to go to Brazil someday. We'll see. Oh, and Adi, thanks again. Wow, 100 baht. Thank you so much. Okay, finally, I'll finish this one. English for All. Please recommend me a book for the TPR method. Okay, good. Yeah, let me show you the book, and then we'll finish here. So for all you teachers out there, any of you who teach any language teaching. So if you're an English teacher or if you teach any language, meaning teaching as a foreign language, right? So you can use this method for any language, Spanish, Japanese, Chinese, English, it doesn't matter. My best recommendations for teachers like me is the TPR storytelling method. I think it is the number one best method. And this is from a lot of years of experience in classrooms. And I tried a lot of methods. And I did all the traditional methods and used all the popular textbooks at the time. And, I've done all that. All the activities and all, I did it all. And this is what works best for you teachers out there. And that is this. So let me I'll hold it on the screen if you're looking. So this is the book, and it's Blaine Ray's book. And the title, Fluency Through TPR Storytelling. TPR, just the letters, TPR. Again, Fluency Through TPR Storytelling. This is the best teacher training book I know for language teachers. Fluency Through TPR Storytelling, Blaine Ray. This is the foundation of Effortless English right here. The language part. Of course, I've added in NLP and other things as well, but for just pure language teaching, Fluency Through TPR Storytelling by Blaine Ray. R-A-Y is his last name. And I think for any of you who are teaching, especially any of you teaching in a classroom, you're teaching in a school, you've got a class of students, you've got 20, 30 or more students, and you've got to keep them interested every day, and you want to get results. You really want them to learn speaking, not just pass a test, some grammar test, not just memorize a bunch of stuff and then can't use English. You really want your students to succeed and develop some real listening and speaking ability, real English ability. Use TPRS, TPR Storytelling. That's the best book. All right, guys, that's all for now. As always, go to effortlessenglishclub.com, effortlessenglishclub.com. Get my courses. My courses use this method, storytelling. It is the easiest way to learn vocabulary, also the easiest way to learn grammar. You will learn the fundamentals of grammar, English grammar. Through these stories, you will not think about English rules. You won't think about grammar rules. You won't have to. You'll develop these automatically, effortlessly, unconsciously by repeating the stories. So this is the way to do it. My courses, all of my courses are at effortlessenglishclub.com, effortlessenglishclub.com. Lots of love to you guys. See you soon.